seemingly opposed to the summit. Why is that?
We actually are very critical of the summit. We've seen many more of this kind of economic blocs coming together, and they have not really benefited ordinary people in various countries. And with the BRICS summit, it has been there for over, with the BRICS, they've been there for over 10 years. But we have seen acceleration of poverty in the countries that the BRICS countries are. We have seen rising levels of pollution. We have seen the very governments investing much more in dirty energy or fossil fuel energy, and this has got detrimental impacts on ordinary people. Is
it the notion of the development bank itself that you are opposed to, or the choice of projects that it's getting involved in?
Basically, development finance institutions all over the world, they have not really been of benefit to the people. Where there's development finance institution financing of different projects, we've seen that there's repression rises, there's murder, there's killing and maiming of environmental justice organizations, of environmental justice activists, and also of human rights defenders. So this bank has not, the new development bank has not been anyhow different, because what I've seen with the bank, it does, when it's in South Africa, it has actually financed Transnet, and it has also financed Eskom. And these institutions, we know that these institutions are under critical scrutiny of the South African public. There's been rampant corruption in this both institutions, and we feel that the way they started doesn't show that it's a bank which is different to other banks. They have given money to Transnet without following any other due diligence. So there's going to be relocation of people, and people are going to be losing their livelihoods. And what happens when people speak out of this, then they get threatened.
It's a very compelling argument that you raise, but how do you balance the need for commercial necessity, in other words, jobs, and keeping the lights on in the country? You mentioned Transnet, for instance, or Eskom, for instance, or Transnet, and the broader environmental impact that you're worried about?
I think it's quite important for us to note that development does not mean destruction. And we have seen that in many times the word development is being misused. Yes, we are for development, but it should be the kind of low-carbon development in our country which doesn't destroy the environment at all. And this, in these institutions, they've got what they call social and environmental safeguards, but you find that these are not followed at all. The laws of the country are being violated. The very principles enshrined in our constitution are not violated. For an example, our constitution says on section 24, everyone has got a right to live in a healthy and clean environment for their being. But we see that whenever there's any project, it's like an oversight. People don't know about it, but whilst it's still enshrined in our constitution, we have massive pollutions in our country, in the Highveld. There's massive pollutions in China. There's massive pollution in Brazil. And also to add on that, there's also repression in Russia. There's repression in China, there is repression in Brazil, with Brazil leading with about 57 human rights defenders being killed. And in South Africa, maybe the documentation has not been that far. So if we do business, we should do business that is for sustainability and not business that is for...
It's inevitable that the status quo is going to continue. The reality of all of this is that you can raise these issues all the time, but your arguments simply fall on deaf ears, don't they?
We are critical, and that's why we're monitoring. And our monitoring, we don't know whether there would be any sort of form of engagement. For an example, currently there's been organizations that have been trying to engage with DECO, with the BRICS, to say, let's have civil society inside. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. People were told, civil society organizations were told, there's no money to be able to have civil society come and engage at the BRICS summit itself.
So how do you make your voice heard?
We will follow, we will use any legislation in our different countries, but moreover, as people who are in these various countries will continue meeting. We come from a 2-day BRICS from Below summit, whereby we had people from different countries explaining and also detailing what happens in their various countries. And we hope that we'll have to engage with different governments, but also come together as a people to be much more critical, continue to monitor, and we hope that the BRICS would not be following what the other multilateral institutions are doing.
Of the BRICS members, which are the worst transgressors in your opinion, and how do we stack up in this country?
I wouldn't really leverage any, because there's differences in countries, but however, there's something very similar, that corruption is rife, and the governance systems in these countries sometimes allow for corruption to continue and human rights to be violated. In South Africa, I think we still stand a better chance because our constitution is a very strong constitution and our courts are actually very vigilant in ensuring that violations do not occur, particularly when they're reported to them.
Why don't you ramp up your anger? Why don't you seek redress through the courts or up the ante as far as your protests are concerned, for instance, along the lines of Greenpeace?
I think we have different tactics, but at the end of the day, what is important...
But the reality is your tactics aren't really working, though, are they?
They are.
You're talking about it, but Brits is doing nothing about it.
Our tactics are working. For an example, last year, the nuclear deal was reversed. And this was a deal that was signed between Russia and South Africa. And Earthlife took the government of South Africa to court, and that deal was annulled. So it's one of the tactics.
But the reality of that is it wasn't due to environmental concern as much as financial consideration.
Not really. I think it's a combination. And that combination, because if we hadn't put the case in court, that means environmental degradation would continue. So we had been able to say we need to protect our environment, but also that the amount of money that was going to use there could be diverted to be used for other social benefits for the people.
But the reality is it isn't, though, is it?
What do you mean by that?
Well, the money that is being saved, there's no guarantee that it's going to be used for the betterment of individuals in this country.
Yeah, that's why
we don't know that, do we?
That's why I indicated that there's corruption in the BRICS countries and the governance systems are not really for the benefit of the majority of the people, but we stand a chance in South Africa because we've got good legislation and also the constitution of the country.
Does it worry you sometimes, depress you, that you are seemingly fighting a losing battle here, that no one's listening to you?
I don't think we're fighting a losing battle. We are winning, particularly because we are holding those who are in decision-making powers, particularly our governments, to account.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Appreciate your time. Thank you. Now